Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our monthly talk for Leicester Friends of the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies. I'd just like to welcome the people we met at the mailer where we're promoting the Leicester Friends group. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you again. This evening's talk is going to be on Hindus' perspectives of success and failure. It'll be something that's probably close to our hearts for ourselves, our family, our children, whatever. Now, the talk was to be given by Anuradha Dooney, but unfortunately her mother was quite ill. But the good news is I've heard she's out of hospital, so I'm sure we'll all send our good wishes and prayers to Anuradha and the family. So we're going to welcome now the director of the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies to do the talk in Anuradha's place. So if you give a round of applause. Cheers.
Anuradha failed. She didn't turn up. She succeeded in getting a replacement. And it remains to be seen if I'm going to fail or succeed. So this can be an interactive program where you can actually judge success and failure. So it could be a good class from that point of view. So success and failure are very interesting words. We've all got experience. Every child has experience of success and failure. But what do we mean by success and failure? Who decides what success is and who decides what failure is? So it's a very important question because if we watch, there's one of the shows on this evening, what's it called? X Factor. Britain Got Talent, one of them. Yep. And it's all about success and failure. And they do something of someone who didn't sing very well and everyone has a good laugh because they failed. And then someone who did astonishingly well, and we all think, oh, fantastic. So, but the fact is we know that these shows are highly edited. So you're edited into success and you're edited into failure, as well as the fact that a person can sing and not sing. It's not quite as simple as that. There's a scheme behind it. There's an idea of commercialization. They want someone who's commercially viable. It's not just that they can sing, but they actually have the personality and the looks and all kinds of other things that go along with it. So success and failure may not be quite simple. It used to be in sports that if you could kick the ball into the goal, that was a success, and you did it in a jolly decent kind of a way. Now, it's if you can trip up the other guy as he gets to the goal, that's perfectly acceptable as well. Because success is not simply about the sport. It's also about your transferability and the amount of money that you command, etc. So there are bigger issues now at stake. So it's shifted what it means to be successful as a footballer or in any kind of sport. Why do so many sports people take drugs? You know, cyclists and horse riders and all kinds of people, they're all taking drugs. What's going on? Why can't they just get up on the horse and ride it and just go for it and you win, you lose, you lose? What's the motivation that you have to succeed? Succeed in what? What are you succeeding for? Is it because you're good at horse riding, or is it because you want to make a lot of money? Or you're interested in fame or celebrity? So what is it that's motivating our idea of success and failure? So these are some things we'd like to look at. So what does failure look like? Failure of our dreams, our marriages, our romances, failure to get the girl or the boy, failure to get your exams. Have we all experienced some of those, if not all? Failure as parents, as sons, as daughters. Failure in, the workplace. Failure to get the job. Failure to sustain the business. Failure to recycle. How many people have failed at recycling? Lots of hands go up there. Failure to control anger when you know you could do better. To control greed. Failure to accept change. To accept illness. To accept death. Failure to accept aging. To accept going bald. It's quite a thing, you know. Changes your whole image of yourself. So we can fail by rubbing stuff into our head that will make our hair grow and stuff like that, and spending money on it as if your hair is going to grow. So failure to face suffering. Anyone got any suggestions of failure? Have we covered the lot, or are there other failures that come to mind? Maybe in your own life, you've had some experience of failure. Failure to vote for the right Prime Minister. Failure to understand who you are. We can introduce you to yourself later on. Failure to have children. And so many people spend so much money and go through so many procedures to try and have children. Very interesting. Any other failures? No. Are you all successes then? How about success? Anyone got ideas of what success means? Any suggestions? I'll leave that to you. Getting the girl, sustaining the relationship, doing the recycling, getting the promotion. What else? Making a lot of money. Fame. Becoming the pop star, becoming the celebrity, becoming the sports icon, or the pop idol, or whatever it is. Realizing one's limitations. Sounds like failure, but it's actually success. That's what you're saying. Interesting. So now we've got success and failure in the one bar. Depends which way you're looking at it. One person is looking at one way. And interesting. Anything else? Success. What measures success for you? Being happy. There you go. Say again? I missed all that. Bringing a smile to someone's face. Very good. Now that could be difficult. That could be pushing someone over a cliff and the person beside you is having a good laugh. But I know what you mean, yes. It could be very successful as well. Anything else? Any other sign of success that comes to mind? Become a politician. Any sign of failure? Become a politician. So it's interesting, you're saying they're quite subjective. It's very interesting that when we start to talk about it as a group, what is an idea of success for me might be an idea of failure for somebody else, and vice versa. Just an interesting observation. And actually, we'll find that in Hindu scripture, it's exactly the same. That life is replete with success and failure. It's just one success and failure moment after another. And we can measure our lives in moments of success and failure. That's one perspective we can take on it. And Hindu scripture, and possibly all scripture, mirror the human condition. They actually analyze the human condition very interestingly. That's one reason why we're interested in their discourse and their conclusions and their stories. But Hindu scripture has a surprising amount of failures in its stories and in its characters. And we read scripture, as I said, for enlightenment and inspiration, etc. But if you read about someone's failure, it's not what you'd look to normally for enlightenment. So what is it we're getting from these stories? Often of failure. Say again? How not to fail, or how to fail gracefully, or how to accept failure. There's so many ways of looking at it. But the interesting thing is we continue to read them. These are the most widely read for the longest period of time scriptures on the planet. Yet they're kind of negative in many of their stories, and many of their stories disastrously so. We can give all kinds of examples. You see, Queen Kunti. Now, Kunti is, the mother of the Pandavas, wonderful woman, chaste woman, and great saintly person, great character, fantastic dharmic. But she had a child out of wedlock, and she didn't know what to do, so she put it into a little basket and shoved it down the river. Hello. There's failure looming large in that description I've just given. That's failure in a major sense. Other examples are Ajamila, who lost his reputation. We'll talk about Ajamila later. The Pandavas. The Pandavas lost their inheritance, they lost their independence, they lost their wife. They lost everything. And they were exiled to the forest. Not great. Ram lost his wife, didn't protect her. You could easily say, where was he? When he was needed. It's a study in failure in one sense. You could look at it from that point of view. Jatayu, he failed miserably, didn't he? He was killed. He tried to do a job and didn't succeed at all. Bharat failed in renunciation, got attached to a little deer. He became a great ascetic. He was a king and he gave up his empire and he withdrew and he was in the forest meditating, and a mother deer was trying to cross the river and she died in the crossing, but her little fawn got across and he took the little fawn. Now you've heard of the fawn. Little fawns, big eyes, Bambi, think Bambi, mother dies, it's the same story. And his heart went out and he became very attached to the little deer and had to come back again. Because he got attached to it after all that, after going through everything perfectly, right? Becoming the king and renouncing everything. That's big enough. Wouldn't you think that's enough? You become the king and you have opulence and you have many wives and you have a treasury to die for, every pleasure, and you just up and leave it all. And what happens? Right at the last minute, the 11th hour, he becomes attached to what? A fawn. Do you think they could forgive him that? No. Had to come back as Jad Bharat. So, and again, a wonderful story, Jad Bharat. Yayati failed to hold on to his youth. His son Puru had to come and exchange bodies with him practically so that he could have a little bit more time being youthful. Parikshit, doomed to die in 7 days. Emperor of the world, couldn't hold death back. Rishabdev lost his kingdom, became an ascetic. Dhritarashtra failed to let go. He couldn't let go, right up to the last moment when he was embracing all the Pandavas and he was going to embrace Bhima, but he was going to crush him. He couldn't let go that bitterness, that anger, that resentment. So his whole life, Dhritarashtra in many passages seems like a good person. The basis of being a good person was there, but he just couldn't make it. Dhruva failed to get his inheritance. Prachanabhati was attacked by old age and disease, couldn't do anything about it. Chitraketu lost his son. Kunti lost Karna, we've mentioned Kunti. Gandhari lost her sight. Vishwamitra lost his meditation and everything. He was meditating for 30,000 years underneath the water. That's pretty stiff. And he opened his eyes after 30,000 years, and there's 2 fish in front of him copulating. And he became agitated. Had to get out and find a girl. It was very sad. Everything goes. And Durvasa, he lost his temper with Ambarish and got severely chastised by Vishnu. Failure happens when we want to achieve a certain goal and it doesn't work. When we have a certain expectation that isn't met, a hope that is vanquished. It means that our confidence shrinks, our enthusiasm shrinks, our inspiration evaporates. And it often looks wrong to us. Failure looks wrong. It looks bad. It looks awkward. People don't like it. That's our perception. We don't want to be associated with it. There's something very negative about it because people don't praise me when I fail. And so a lot of it is not even to do with us. It's to do with what other people think of us. So that's one very important part of our perception. When we see something as success or failure, we're not always seeing it from our own perspective. It's not how we feel about it, it's how other people feel about it is as informative to what we see as success and failure. That's important for us to know. So that association with others tells us what success and failure means. So if we're glued to the television, then to be on the X Factor is success, just to get on. It would seem from some of the contestants that that's all they're doing, just getting on for that 5 minutes of fame, and their whole life has been transformed and is successful. And how do we decide then what success and failure is? Does anyone have any suggestions as to how they decide what success and failure is? We know that we're influenced by others, but what else are we influenced by? How do we make those decisions? So we set ourselves targets. How do we decide what a target is? See, I'm kind of trying to get down to the bottom line. They didn't tell you coming here that you had to think, did they? Yeah, it's there, exactly. Think Hindu studies. Just think, comma, Hindu studies. How do you get to the point where you decide what a target is, what your goal is? Ron. Yeah, so it is an interesting phenomenon that sometimes you get praise for doing something that, like you say, that you thought, actually I didn't think that was very good at all. And then sometimes you give your all and all and people just kind of look at you and go, so. But still, how do we decide what the goal is? Because we would have had to decide to do something before we succeeded and failed. So we would have had to have an image of what success meant and what the consequent failure would mean before we even started, before we got to the stage where people were praising us or blaming us. How do we decide?
It depends on the stage of one's life. For a child, the goal is decided by the parents. And the child would be deemed to be a success by the parents, whether he achieves or he doesn't achieve. So it depends on, for a 5-year-old child, he does well in his exams. The parents will praise him, or the people around him, or his relatives will praise him. For him, this is success. But for a younger man, his goals are different. Whether he succeeds in his university, or in exams, or gets a nice job, or better job, then it's a different answer. So we decided on the different stages, depends on the stage of life.
So it's a very good point. I think it's an excellent point. And I think, yes, to some extent, to a large extent, our parents tell us what success and failure is in the initial stages of life and our environment. And more at an earlier and earlier age, media of all kinds tell children what success and failure is independently of parents. But it is true that at about the age of 5, success is sherbet, fizzy drink, and some bag of sweets, chocolate. And that would be generally success. So no matter what you do, if you get that, you're doing big. And it is the case that when you're 45 years old, all those things are possibly your doctor is telling you not to eat any of them. But it's not considered a great success, as at the end of the day you come home to your wife and children with a sherbet, a fizzy drink, and a box of chocolates. You know what I mean? I think they've moved on, they expect you to have moved on. So our goals are changing anyway. So we're deciding goals. We're saying, this is my goal at the age of 5. At the age of 10, we have a completely different goal. At the age of 16, if you're a boy, it's just girls. Forget the chocolate. What's chocolate for? It's only part of a process of getting a girl. It's not for you anymore. It's just a currency exchange thing. So goals, desires, motivation, what we expect, what we hope for, is in a constant stage of development. But we're still making decisions all along that path. So even though our parents are telling us what success and failure is, we're still deciding that actually it's sherbet. When I was a kid, I was quite clear what success was. And it was sweets and butter and milk. And as long as a day had enough of that balance, hogia. I can go to bed with a smile on my face. I've made someone happy. Me. But we all do have goals right from the earliest age. It's something intuitive, instinctive. So I've been asking you, how do you set your goals? And we're having a little difficulty kind of thinking about it. But I think that we all set goals consciously and unconsciously all the time. It's a muscle reflex. So yes, spiritual thinking or scriptural thinking is actually challenging someone to say, to asking this question: what are your goals? How are you setting them? What do you consider success and failure? So even though the texts are replete with success and failure, the idea is to get you to think, to reflect, and to consciously, not unconsciously, set your goals, to consciously question what success and failure really is. So we'll go into that in a second. So yeah, we rely on our own vision, our own experience, our own, our own knowledge, our own aptitude, but all these things are very partial. You know, we have a little bit of knowledge, not a lot of knowledge necessarily. We have a little bit of experience, we have a little bit of qualification. So our process, the way we can process information to decide on success and failure, could be weak from the start. Now, this is very much Hindu scriptural basic, that right from the beginning you're in trouble and you need help. Unless you realize that, there's no humility. You can't get any help. But you are dependent. And that's not the mantra of the age. The mantra of the age is we are independent. We can do what we want. Go out and strive. Just do it. Is that the Nike one? You know, people are just telling you if it feels good, do it. But it's not as simple as that. So, and these texts, they're talking about failure because they want us to reflect on failure. They don't want us to ignore it. It's a very important part of the process. If our life is made up of stories of success and failure, we know one thing: failure is guaranteed. Success is also guaranteed, in big ways and in little ways. So if these things are going to come upon us, just by the arrangement of nature, just by the fact that we live in this world, just by the fact that we bump into other people. And so a relationship with a person on a train could be a success or a failure. Every interaction we have could be a success or a failure. One enthuses us, one depresses us. So if that's the case, if we know that that's the case, then we know that we have to get this right. We have to understand what is success, not be led by the nose by someone else to tell you, oh, you're doing really well, you're doing fantastically well, it's good, just give me all your money, keep giving me the money. So what is it? We have to use our brain to discern these things. And that's what these texts are trying to help us understand. So I wanted to focus on 3 stories. Where are they from? 2 from the Bhagavad Purana and 1 from the Ramayana. So, 1 from the Ramayana. We'll go with that first. Jatayu. I think Jatayu is a wonderful story. I like it very much. I like Jatayu as a character. He was just... Jatayu failed miserably in his attempt to stop Ravan. And as he said to Ram himself, when Ram and Lakshman found him, they had been following a trail. So that a trail had been left. So they knew where to go, in Ravan's path. He didn't leave any footsteps. He was in a chariot and flying along. But there's a trail of destruction, of uprooted trees and things bashed about and pieces of chariot and pieces of armor and all kinds of things just strewn along the way until they finally came to Jatayu. And Jatayu, his wings had been chopped off and his legs had been chopped off. He was doomed. And he was just so glad that they had come, that they could tell Ram and Lakshman what direction Sita was brought in. So he's a failure. Any redeeming qualities? What's that? He fought to the end. That's considered success. Only to fail. He sacrificed himself and he failed. Is that a success? So who's deciding what's success here? I'm saying success is he didn't win the fight. You're saying success is he sacrificed himself. You're saying success is he fought to the end and failed. Say again? He showed the next step forward. He seems to be an important character in the story. I mean, the fact that he's mentioned at all is important in itself. Here we are talking about him, even though ostensibly he's a failure. So he showed the next step. That's an important service. He showed Ram and Lakshman which direction Ravan went in, that he went south. That's what they needed to know. Otherwise, there were 4 directions. Anything else? Any other ways that he might be deemed a success? He tried his best. Very good. He had darshan of Ram at the time of death. Considered the perfect death. In consciousness of Ram at that time. That's a success. Most of us don't get that opportunity. Very few indeed. Anything else? They're good ones. There is one kind of final one is, Ram. Yeah. So that's success. So even in his failure, he was successful. Very good. And he was also the only person that Sita saw fighting for her. She didn't see anyone else fighting for her. And for a woman in that condition, she needed encouragement. And she saw someone taking her condition seriously. And even when the battle for Lanka was going on, Sita didn't actually see it. She just got reports. But she actually saw Jatayu doing his best, in difficult circumstances. And Jatayu himself said, it was age against youth. It was talons and wings against, weapons of metal. He knew he was doomed, but he made the effort anyway. So interestingly, a complete failure is also a success. Now, the scripture doesn't say one way or the other. It leaves it up to the reader to decide. And this is the interesting part, that materially, he failed. From Ravana's point of view, he was just a mosquito. Whoop, get out of the way. That was an old bird. What was his program? And just moved on. So from that purely material perspective, he was just not of any consequence. But from a spiritual perspective, because every success we talked about is not a material success. Materially, he did fail. We're talking about a spiritual success, a dharmic success. So spiritually, he was in the presence of Ram when he died. Spiritually, he pleased Sita. He was the only person to give it that encouragement. And dharmically, he did the right thing. He did what he could. He did his best, as you said. Right, so he's an example to all of us to give it a go. So there was a purpose in his action. Even though he knew he was going to fail, he still did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. So that's interesting. And even though we may not see the bigger picture, and he was only a small actor in the bigger picture, but his part was important as another stage of development. As the first thing that was said. His was the next step to Ram finding out where Sita was. So we can understand that from that there's a bigger picture that we don't have access to. We have our little knowledge, our little perception, our little experience, and we make our decisions and set our goals based on that. We decide on success and failure based on that. But in the bigger scheme of things, success and failure could be based on something completely different. We see that in the story of Arjuna, where Krishna helps him understand that there's a bigger game at play here. It's not just about this battle. There's bigger issues. I want you to be part of the bigger picture, not your little picture, if I kill my relatives, I won't be happy. He says, that's not the issue there. So again, it comes back, how do we set our goals? How do we decide what success and failure is? So it's beginning to expand, to broaden our options, broaden our choices, broaden the base upon which we make decisions. Another story is of Ajamila. Does anyone know the story of Ajamila? Bhagavad Purana? Not many? Ajamila, great story. Ajamila was a young Brahmin, and it's in the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much. Young Brahmin boy, very well educated, very well trained, came from a good family, quite well to do. He married a very chaste wife, very beautiful, and all was going well. He was going along his Brahminical work. Going through the forest one day, he'd been sent off by the head priest of the temple to get some firewood, special wood for the yagyas. He went off, and as he was there, he saw a Sudra with a prostitute. And the Sudra was enjoying with the prostitute, and everyone was enjoying very much, and we won't get into any more details. Some details are given in the Bhagavad Purana. I was shocked. And so basically, it's like a young boy getting exposed to pornography. He's doing his exams and all that kind of stuff. He presses a button, go, and the mind starts to dwell. So he got home, and all he could think about was the prostitute. Never seen anything like that. Very interesting. Started to meditate, found the prostitute, engaged her as a servant in the household, became very attached to her, started to sell things and give money to her, and sell things from the family, and eventually had a child with her, gave up his wife, gave up his Brahminical activities, took up all kinds of disreputable pursuits just to maintain the family. He had 10 children. Finally, at the age of 88, he had lost his reputation, lost his fame, lost his family, lost everything. At the age of 88, he was lying in bed, and his little son, Narayan, he still had a young son. And this was the fact that he still had a young son at the age of 88 meant there was more than one prostitute involved. And, he had just got into licentious life. He'd completely lost the plot. And his son's name was Narayan. His son was everything to him. And he would always say, Narayan here, Narayan come here, Narayan, 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 Narayan. He was just talking about his son. And then he was lying in bed one day, and all of a sudden, through the wall, without actually coming through the wall, 3 very fearsome characters arrived with ropes and started to tie it around him. But it wasn't around his body, but it was still around him. And they were dragging him out of his body. And he was completely freaked. And he saw his son, Narayan, in the garden, and he shouted out, Narayan, Narayan! And he couldn't hear him. And when he shouted Narayan, Narayan, 3 other characters came in. Again, came through the wall, but the wall was still intact. And these were beautiful, shining characters. And these characters were the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas. Duta means order carrier, servant of. So the Yamadutas are the order carriers of Yamaraj, the Vishnudutas of Vishnu. And when Yamaraj wants someone who hasn't been a good boy or girl, the Yamadutas come, and they're not a pleasant sight, and it's not a pleasant experience. Fairly fearsome characters. But if someone is going to Vishnu, the Vishnudutas come. So this is the story. So they all come to the wall, and they're all confronting each other, and they never meet each other. Because either the chap is destined for this place or that place. It's simple. If they're going in front of Yamaraj, he's going to judge them. If they have no fault, they go to Vishnu, no issues. So they were all looking at each other kind of, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And the Yamadutas recited his history and said, this guy he's clearly for it. He did like 18 years of his life, he was a good boy. And then, for 70 years, he blew it. So, we got him. And the Vishnudutas say, well, yeah, we have a problem because he chanted the name Narayan. And he chanted it without offense, which is the important part. He chanted it just, Narayan. It's completely out of total dependence. He had nowhere else to go except to shout out Narayan. But the Vishnudutas took that and this is the idea of the story. That shouting of the name offenselessly was pure. And that purified all his past. So interesting, he spent 70 years in utter failure, a social reject. And we all know people who become drunks or drug addicts or some such thing, or disgrace their family in some way, in the same way that Ajamila has done. Yet, at this time in life, the Vishnudutas come and it's all cancelled. Why? Because he did one thing right. It's a very hopeful story that failure isn't the end of the program. So, and Ajamil did it by accident. It wasn't even intentional. It wasn't that he was there going, for the last 5 years of his life, Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. I hope this works, Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. Because actually, if he would have been doing that, he would have been very fruitive. And he wouldn't have been chanting purely. He would have been chanting just for himself. So, interestingly, that the Vishnudutas say that this was arranged because of his wonderful service in the beginning of his life. Narayan never forgot him. So he arranged this circumstance so that he could get this shock and wake up. So the Vishnudutas and the Yamadutas agreed to part, which meant that he didn't die. But he got a wake-up call, and then he took to his spiritual life, and he became very successful. So both things are there. He was a failure, but he was also a success. If anyone knows that story, does anyone have anything else to add? Any other perspectives on it? It's not the most well-known story, but it's a very good one because there's a little bit of us in Ajamila. We all recognize ourselves in his story. There's choices we've made that we're not proud of, and that we just think, "Oh God, I hope no one ever finds out." And unfortunately with Facebook and all that kind of stuff, it's more difficult to sustain that because some of the mistakes we make are on these social media networks and that kind of stuff. And the things you put up when you're a 20-year-old and you're going, click send, oh, my friends will love that. 40 years from now, we try to wipe it, ringing up Facebook, just wipe it, I'll pay you money. So we've all done things that we consider failures, and that we consider maybe this cancels everything good out. But this story is about spirituality is more powerful than material failure, spiritual success. So it's a very interesting story to look at someone, because in our communities anyway, religious or even just family oriented in any way, there's always standards. And you always have to go and find out from someone else what the standard is because you're never quite sure. And if something goes wrong, you're kind of, oh God, did I do that? And they say, yeah, you didn't do it from the right side. And, when you picked up the water, you actually touched your lips to the cup. And there's all these little things that are failures. And we fail on a daily basis. And you never use your left hand. All the things that you have to do, and if you don't do them, you're going to go to hell things. So it's kind of like that. So what's a failure? And this is saying that religion, culture is one thing, but your heart's yearning for the Supreme is a different thing. They're not of the same order. And even if you've been a complete failure, and Ajamila's story is interesting also because he started so well. He knew what was right and wrong. It's not that he was an idiot and he just kind of tumbled from one thing to the next and ended up in a mess. Well, you'd expect that, wouldn't you? Not at all. He made the wrong decision knowing what the right decision was. It's kind of inexcusable. And still, he was redeemed in that last instant. So again, a very hopeful, interesting story of success. And finally, Chitraketu. Does everyone know the story of Chitraketu? Again, from the Bhagavad Purana? Oh, you're missing so many. We must do some classes on the Bhagavad Purana. It's got so many characters in it that are just wonderful. I'm only glossing over Ajamila. The content, if we were to read some of the shlokas from the text, the content is very rich. But Chitraketu as well. And Chitraketu, interestingly, goes from being Chitraketu to Vritasura. So he goes from being a highly advanced devotee to being a demon. But even as a demon, he's a devotee. Hinduism. So he's a very interesting character. He starts out not as a sadhu, but as a king. Very, very wealthy king of a very big kingdom. He had many wives, all beautiful. It said, beautiful with big eyes, it says in the text, which is interesting. Obviously, big eyes are better than slanty eyes, so if you're slanty eyes, you're sorry. But beautiful with big eyes. He was very handsome, very well educated, tremendous opulence. He had everything he wanted except a son. And all his wives were barren. So all he wanted was a son. He had everything else materially you could ask for. So Angira Rishi came to his palace and he was received very wonderfully, and Chitraketu said, you have everything, but you seem unhappy. What's wrong? And he said, well, I've been desiring a son. Maybe you could help me. I can't get a son. So Angira organized the yajna and organized for him to get a son. He said, but this son, it says, Harsha Shoka Pradas Tubhyam. He says, this son will bring you Harsha Shoka, delight and lamentation. So it's going to bring you both things. So Chitraketu was, I don't care, just a son will do, a son. So the son was born, beautiful son, everyone loved him, the whole palace was thrilled, the whole empire was thrilled, everyone was like a relief and all that. But of course, as in all these stories, human condition comes into play, and the other wives, suddenly ignored, became envious. And their envy consumed them, and they plotted and they poisoned the son. The son died. Everyone was plunged into lamentation. And then Angira Muni and Narada Muni were passing through, and they stopped and they tried to console Chitraketu. And they consoled him by, as in at every Hindu funeral, you talk about the difference between the Atma, and they said, so who is your son and who is your father? And these relationships are like pebbles meeting in the sea, and they come together for some time. And Chitraketu was inconsolable. So Narada Muni said, okay, let your son come back. We'll organize that he comes back. His span of life was to be so long, and it was cut short, so he can still come back. So let him come back, and we'll arrange it. So he manifests the son. The son entered the body and sat up, and everyone was thrilled to bits again. So we're going from delight to lamentation to delight, just bouncing around. And the son sat up, and Narada Muni said, so you've come back now, and you are to be the son of your father and mother who have missed you so much. And the son said, what father? Which mother? Which life? Which one do you want me to be attached to? And all of a sudden Chitraketu and the queens kind of looked at each other, and the son went into a whole big talk. And it was kind of the same talk that Narada Muni and Angira Muni had given, but now it was from a completely different perspective. It was from the son. And the son was declaring himself and saying, I've been the son of so many fathers and mothers, in so many bodies, in so many species. Well, which one do you want me to take seriously now? I've taken them all seriously, but none of them have brought me happiness. None of our relationships have sustained. So what relationship do you want me to have that will sustain? Is this the relationship that will sustain? Everyone's sitting up, this newly resurrected son, and this is what he had to say. He wasn't interested in staying. He wasn't interested in being there. So they all naturally let him go, and they had the funeral for the body. Interesting story. Now, as I say, it gets even funkier as time goes on, because it's interesting how he becomes a demon. I'll have to tell you that bit. But he was elevated from that moment. He actually met Vishnu, became very purified, very detached, and he was the king of the Vijitharas, which is a class of demigods, traveling all over the place, meeting Vijitharas, giving prabhachan, being fated, and a great hero, great wonderful person. And he was flying over Mount Kailash one time, and he looked down and he saw Lord Shiva sitting naked, giving prabhachan to a group of sannyasis, and sitting on his knee was Parvati. And he just thought, this is such a funny scene. Lord Shiva sitting there with his wife on his lap, talking to all these sannyasis, and he started to laugh. And Parvati got annoyed. You don't annoy Parvati, by the way. If you ever near Mount Kailash, just be that little bit careful. But he started to laugh, and Parvati heard him and cursed him to become a demon. Now it's said that the whole thing was arranged by Vishnu. Vishnu wanted him to come back in his body as Vijitara. He was going to live for thousands of years. But Vishnu wanted him to come back, so he arranged a special arrangement. So he came back as a demon, Vritasura, no ordinary demon. He was massive. And he joined the demon's side in the wars against the demigods, and now they were winning because of him. And he would come in and just go wham, and just wipe out whole hordes of demigods. And eventually they, cut a long story short, they got a weapon that could kill him. And Indra was standing on a mountain, because that's the only place he could launch it from. He was so big. And he was trying to launch it, and his hand was shaking, and he couldn't actually get it together. And Vritasura was standing in front of him, and Vritasura stops and says, fire the weapon. And Indra was kind of, fire the weapon, what's wrong with you? I'm not this body. It's my time. I have to die. I have to die at your hand. If you don't do it, what am I going to do? Going to be in this demon body all my life? I don't like it. It's just whole completely different discourse. And Indra kind of go. So anyway, interesting story. But the story of Chitraketu and his son. Here was someone who was a failure at having a son. Richest guy on the planet with tons of wives and all of them barren. Stuffed. He got a boon to have a son. He has a son and then he loses him. Failure. But in the end, his lack of son was his success. So the whole thing turns around. So his decision that this was success, to want a son more than anything else, to be so attached to this that he lost all perspective, all feeling for everything else, even all feeling for his other queens, which ultimately brought about this downfall. He completely took his eye off the ball. So his idea of success totally led to his failure, materially. Yet also led to his success spiritually. So it's interesting in every one of these cases, and all the cases we see, material failure can often be spiritual or dharmic success. So what is success from one perspective, one person reading the story? Say there's a girl who really wants a child, and she's reading about Chitraketu. She's kind of going, oh, it's so sad. Such a sad story. May not even get the point. Because her idea of success is fixed. And it's very difficult to accept that not having a child is also okay. And that's his destiny. That's for him. That's good for him. Whereas for someone else to have a child, that's success. No problem. And it's even part of their spiritual life. Why not? But not for Chitraketu. So who's setting the agenda? Who's deciding what is success and what is failure? We still come back to that. So the scriptures offer us these stories, which are essentially meditations. They're meditations for us to reflect upon and to develop our own perspective, to make our decision as to what success and failure is. It's to expand the possibilities. That sometimes failure is success and sometimes success is failure. And we need to be reading the text from the right perspective. We need to be looking at our circumstance from the right perspective. So this kind of scriptural reasoning, trying to reason with the text, actually helps develop that muscle of perspective, helps broaden it, helps open it up to other possibilities, new ways of seeing, new ways of thinking, new darshans, new visions. So we need, so understanding that the lessons to be learned, to understand that it is natural to lose perspective. It's natural to fail. Without failure, it's very difficult to have success because there's nothing to reflect on. They say failure is the pillar of success for a reason. Because you have something to reflect on, you can improve, you can go forward. Why? Because failure is perfectly natural and normal. In fact, without failure, it's very difficult to lead a balanced life. It's very difficult to understand what life is about. It's very difficult to be tolerant with others, to be compassionate to others. And we need these stories and these meditations and these other perspectives to reflect on. Our own understanding, our own knowledge, our own perspective is not enough. It's just too limited. We need to read other perspectives and to find the best stories, the most broad-minded, the most spiritual, the most informed. And we also need personal help, the warmth and affection of others' wisdom. So we can be reading a text and completely misunderstanding it, whereas someone else can sit beside us and just give us a whole new perspective on the text we're reading. Open it up to us completely because of the life that they have lived, because of their personal warmth, their affection for us. They'll sit beside us and say, actually, look at it this way. And it's interesting, you can't get that understanding from someone who has some experience or some wisdom without warmth involved, without a relationship involved, without some affection. There's so many wise people going on the planet, they don't talk to everybody because you can't just open up to everybody. You only open up to someone who's actually interested. So if you find someone who's actually practicing a spiritual life, who has real realization, they're not going to just be scattering it around the streets. They're waiting for someone to come and ask an intelligent question. If someone asks a question, it means they're interested in the answer. If you're not asking a question, you're not thinking. And finally, we need to make decisions. We can't just go through life not making decisions or allowing other people to make them for us, or having our script written for us or our story dictated to us. We have to take control and be the writer of our own story and make decisions, be they right or wrong. We make the best decision we can in the circumstance. We succeed or fail. Our material failure could be a spiritual success. That's the purport of these texts. Thank you very much.
Making decisions, but I'm not so sure whether my way of thinking is, or my way of leading the life so far is just take the day as it goes, and not. My wife makes the most decisions. Take the day as it goes, and face it.
Not thinking about any success or failures.
Yeah, not so much perturbed about the successes of it. Well, obviously I'll be happy if I'm successful, and not so happy when I'm not so successful. That's there. But I'm not. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not setting too much goals and stuff like that. That's what I'm trying to say.
We all have plans and goals, and if you get married and you have children, plans and goals. Because you're thinking about your children for the rest of your life. I knew a monk in Ireland, a Catholic Cistercian monk, and he was a very good friend. He was in his 70s, and a very wise man. I used to go to him just to talk about spiritual life. And he had a mother in her 90s who used to visit him every year, because they were allowed a family visit every year. And every year she used to come and get on his case and say, "Leave this monastery, you should go out and get married." So even in her 90s, when he was in his 70s, she still had her goals and her ambition. So it's natural, it's normal, there's nothing wrong with it. But, that's what I said at the beginning. We don't even realize we have goals. We don't even realize we're making plans. We just kind of fall into it. It's like there was a Swami in India, a gentleman said, he was saying how we're all afraid of death, and the gentleman stood up and said, "I am not afraid of death." And he asked him, he said, "Do you cross the street at a green light?" And he said, "Yes." "You're afraid of death." We ask simple questions, and we don't realize that things we do are because of who we are and how we think. And we're thinking in the background. It's like we're subconsciously making decisions. You know what I mean? And we can stand up and say, "I'm not afraid of death," without having thought it through. That's not how we lead our life. We're all making plans. So I understand what you're saying in the bigger picture. To minimize stress, we live one day at a time. I get it. But we do hope for happiness. We do hope for success. We do not want failure. Every one of us. And we all measure it by different measures. Any instances of spiritual failure and material success? Oh, this could be bad. Joseph Stalin, material success. He never got pulled down. His only failure was to die. Mao Zedong, top of his game right till the day he died. Spiritually, 70 million people in China died during peacetime. That is failure, abject failure by any man's. That's spiritual failure, material failure. But materially, in terms of being on top of his game, being the leader, the chairman, successful. So it depends which way you look at it. And I would look, there are a lot of people that we hold dear in the world that I would consider spiritual failures and material successes. So a lot of our successes, we get big business people and they're billionaires, and they've got islands and cars and airplanes and all the works and everything like that, and then they die. And they can't use any of their billions to extend their life by 1 second.
I would rather regard someone as being dead if he found that he was so attached to life that it's not something that he was willing to give up for things that he values. And really, the people who really love life are the ones who have actually sacrificed life. And, people who have actually fought for their countries, and they've actually left a heritage because of that sacrifice. Mm-hmm. That's real life to me.
Yeah, I would agree and disagree with you. The Talmud, the Jewish text, has a very interesting statement to do with that. It says the rich man is the one who's satisfied with what he has. It's an interesting meditation, interesting thing to meditate on. But sacrifice by itself is not, and we go to the Bhagavad Gita 17th chapter to look at sacrifice in the mode of ignorance, sacrifice in the mode of passion, sacrifice in the mode of goodness. So there's different kinds of sacrifice and different modes of sacrifice, and some of them are material, and some sacrifice can be spiritual. But sacrifice for your country, I would consider to be a spiritual failure, a material success. So patriotism, as we know it today, is a very recent phenomenon. So the author of Gulliver's Travels, Dean Swift, in the late 1700s said that patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. If you invoke patriotism, it means you've lost every other argument, and you're just, it's totally emotionalism at that stage. So he's just rejecting it. Yet Lloyd George says in World War I, 100 years later, just over 100 years later, that sacrifice is the pinnacle of success. Two different completely, in 100 years, social perception had changed so much. Now, I'm an Irishman, and in 1916, just nearly 100 years ago, these guys went out and had a revolution in Dublin that led to Irish independence. They sacrificed their lives. They were all put up against the wall and shot, and they all knew they were going to be put up against the wall and shot, and they knew that when that happened, Ireland would rise. And it's exactly what happened. They hit the nail on the head. But to sacrifice for the idea of nation is a material concept. Nation is only a material thing. Ireland is not Irish. It's only a piece of land. It existed before the Irish came, and it will exist when the Irish leave. So we can take it seriously as much as we're standing on it and you get a passport that says you're Irish, and that's helpful. But from a spiritual point of view, it doesn't have a lot of endurance, even if it lasts 2,000 years, even if it lasts 10,000 years. In the light of eternity, it doesn't make much odds. So what's significant to sacrifice for? What's spiritual? What's eternal? The spiritual sacrifice would be a sacrifice to do with something eternal. So you sacrifice for that principle, that goal, and that's the goal you set. And then you would say that's success. But if you're doing it for something material, now, as a good Irishman, I was brought up in a very nationalistic family. My granduncles fought for the IRA as officers, right? So we had all these stories and nationalism up to here. But I come in contact with these texts, and I do have to reconsider, was this sacrifice spiritual and material? Now, if we're judging things materially, it was the pinnacle of success. If we're judging them spiritually, it was the last refuge of a scoundrel. There's no issue about being cognizant of the material world. Nationalism is only 220, 230 years old as a concept. So the idea of nationhood as we understand it now is very recent. So it's not addressed in the Vedas, because from a Vedic point of view, if you're talking about Atma or the pursuit of Sat or the idea of Dharma, nationalism is just a political expedient. It's an idea of ownership, and that's just ego. It just says, I come to this land and I go, it's mine. And I last for 80 years, like I have a house in Oxford and I have furniture and all that stuff, and it's all mine. If someone comes in to take it, I'm going to fight them for it and all that. I take it very seriously. It's mine. But then I'm going to die. And then it's going to be someone else's. It's going to be in an auction, and someone's going to say, oh, that's really nice. And all my clothes will be auctioned off in some charity shop or something like that. And it's not mine, for all that I said it was mine. And I buy a lot of my clothes in charity shops. So, as a friend said one time, I buy dead threads. I'm buying suits from people who've died. You know, who once owned this, bought this suit. Good suits. I only buy good suits. Good suits. But the fact is, there's no endurance to them, you know, to our ownership. So the Vedas don't take ownership very seriously. They don't take ego of that level very seriously. They take ego seriously, because ego, the word means identity. They take identity seriously, and as this gentleman said, the question is, you know, who I am. To answer that, that's a fundamental question of the Vedas, but the answer isn't Irish. Why? Well, you're Indian and you don't give us stuff, do you? And Indian nationalism? Well, what do I care? He's a brilliant example, but he's not a nationalist. And I think we can't associate Ram with modern nationalism. That just doesn't make any sense, because Ram would not have agreed with this egotistical and kind of very an identity that just leads to a false attachment, and a false attachment that leads to conflict and leads to angst and anxiety and stress and puts others into difficulty and separates us from other people. Now, I might not be popular in those views. I'm just repeating what I've read.
I do feel that if you don't have some sense of your origins or your identity, then you're totally lost. And I think for us it's Ram. For yourself, if you know, from whatever sentiment you might have, it could be Ram or it could be David. And for me, I think that would be great.
Yeah, and I agree we have to have some markers in this world as to who we are, and we get it from family, and we get it from Ram, not to forget Krishna, not to forget Shiva, not to forget Durga. So it's not just Ram, yeah, even if you're an Indian. You know, so, and where do I get it from in Ireland? I get it from all kinds of stuff, but I've adopted some Indian things as well. But I can do, because I don't take the borders seriously. It's not, I don't intellectually have to give a passport when I think of Krishna. Do you know what I mean? I can just think of him and it's free, and it's not an issue. And that's, I think, how it should be. That's certainly how it is in a book called the Vedas, which means a book of knowledge that's there for everybody. So it's not that, you know, Irish people can't read the Vedas. That would just be weird. Why? Because it's an Indian thing. It's not Indian. Who said the Vedas were Indian? When did that start? Ram wasn't an Indian. He was from Ayodhya. India is something that manifests sometime later. So, you know, so if you want to get into the history of it, actually Ram comes from a specific kingdom. And that's, he owns that kingdom, he's associated with that kingdom. I've never seen him associated with anything else successfully. And we can associate it with all of India, but I can take him into my house. I have a picture of Ram in my house, and I take it very seriously. I take the example of Ram very seriously. So Ram is now in Oxford. And the kingdom of Ayodhya has been transplanted. Is that possible? And if it is possible, then we're not talking about nationalism. We're talking about something much more profound.
Anyway, I've got two short questions. One's about conscientious objectors. Where's the success and failure of that? Because they are objecting to their country's goals.
Sorry?
Conscientious objectors.
Conscientious objectors.
Yeah, where's the success and failure in that? Because they are objecting to their nation's patriotism. And they're there as a standalone.
I mean, again, I go back to my criticism of nationalism. You have someone who doesn't want to fight. Full stop. It's not that they don't want to fight for their country. They don't want to fight. They're, on the most part, conscientious objectors. Their motivation was much more profound than I'm not a nationalist or I don't like my country. That's not why they didn't want to fight. They didn't want to fight because they didn't want to kill people. They didn't agree with violence. Now, that's not saying I don't want to serve my country. It's saying I don't want to kill for any reason, my country or any other reason. That's very high-minded. These are very valuable people in society. People who are so thoughtful and reflective. People who are so compassionate, so sensitive. Why would you punish people like that? That doesn't make any sense. Unless your vision of society and country has become so small that it's just within the bounds of the political term nationality. So unless you've bought into this political objective of nationhood, why should everyone have to do that? If we actually live in a democracy, I have the right to say, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that political persuasion, because that's what it is. It's a political persuasion. Now, we assume that it is the absolute truth, but it is actually a political persuasion. And I don't agree with it personally. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed because I read the Vedas. Right? And it doesn't make any sense to me. And if I see someone who's high-minded, and I don't care what religion they're from, a lot of these people were Quakers and different things, it's not an issue for me. These are people who are thoughtful, sensitive, high-minded. Give them their freedom. Allow them to practice as they would practice, because the Vedas has always allowed everyone to practice as their conscience dictates, as their consciousness dictates. So I'm not going to stop that. If God has allowed them to do it, I'm not going to stand in their way in the name of the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, nationalism, or any other ism. As far as I'm concerned, flush it down the toilet, because it's only causing us trouble. If you had a government that could actually pick on the best people in society to be in the cabinet, wouldn't that be interesting? And if every second word that came out of a politician's mouth wasn't how the other guy's an idiot, what's positive about that? I don't get it. So party politics hasn't led us anywhere good, and it's become more and more congealed and consolidated over the last 200 years. And party politics is only 200 years old. So we have to look at the history and how recent all these dilemmas are. So previously, if someone was like that, people would go, "Oh, fair enough." Anyone else want to fight?
Can I ask one short question? Another question. Why is society poisoned enough to exhibit their wealth, to show off their wealth? We are this, we are that.
Because we're quite convinced that that's success.
My son is this much, has this many GCSEs, regardless whether you can order conversation.
And we're having a wedding for my son. Come and look at how opulent it will be. And you walk up and down the street here in Belgrave Road and all the jeweller's shop and bling bling. There's nothing wrong with looking beautiful and looking handsome and all that kind of stuff. That's not an issue. Overdoing it just looks like overdoing it, doesn't it, really? And some people in society are always going to overdo it, and some people are going to have big mouths, and some people are going to have big lives, etc. So if we take that seriously, that becomes our problem.
No, but then you go back to what you were just saying. Let everybody do what they want. If that's what they want to do,
that's
fine, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If we are saying that religiously, you can do what you want from your perspective.
You can't stop
Their
them.
perspective
Exactly.
is that, isn't it?
Exactly. And you can't stop them walking up and down the street, strutting up and down.
So should we judge them and saying, "Oh, this is really opulent. This
No.
500 million
Society
pounds
needs
Why?
people like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Don't we need all these people? Very interestingly, in Vedic sacrifices, it was very auspicious to invite homosexuals and prostitutes. I just told a story where the prostitute is the villain. And all of a sudden, prostitute is an auspicious person to bring along. Why? Because they exist. You don't cut them out of society. Everyone is included in society. And you get your peacocks strutting up and down. What would the world be without peacocks? What would the world be without some lady overdressed or some man overdressed?
So then we come back to that same thing that, when we judge to say, this is, opulence or, they want...
But the issue is, we don't have to take it seriously. The issue is,
I don't think anybody does.
We have choices.
I don't think anybody does. I think it is a bit of a joke, really. But, it's not us to say,
It depends on, intellect, how serious you take it. This country is very good at wealth porn and poverty porn, showing programs of immense opulence, wealth, and showing programs of immense poverty, benefits, etc. And people run on that. They enjoy that, etc. And it's all based on your decision, how you see it as a 360-degree view. I quite enjoyed the program on the Hotel Taj India. That was very good because it showed opulence, it also showed poverty, it showed everything. It showed the people that make up the fabric of the workforce, everything. Not that I'm advertising the program, but...
it sounded like a good review. You should watch that program. Is think. That's what the texts are asking us to do, essentially. They're asking us to think. Okay, final questions. One final question. Man with babe in arms.
My name is Ruben. I just wanted to second that. I think at the end of the day, it's all about free choice. And it doesn't really matter what goes on around you. But the thing is, what you have to do in the end is decide for yourself why you're doing something for the right reasons. And respect other people for what they're doing. Because they've got as much right as you have.
Yeah, I would give a qualified yeah, because you can't respect some things. The fact is there are norms in society, and there are certain things that are just not acceptable. And even certain things that are acceptable in society may not be acceptable to you. And what's wrong with that? So we don't have to go with just society is all going in this direction, so then it's okay. We don't have to accept that. We do have choice. That's what choice means. So it means that we will sometimes choose not to accept someone being what they are because it's actually injurious, because actually it's bad for society. And it's okay to go so far, but if you go over a line, so who draws the line? We all draw the line individually, and we all draw the line collectively. And some people will not be happy with the collective decision. And there's a thing called loyal dissent in democracy, where you make a decision that green means go, and you thought, no, red should mean go, right? But you go on green, because otherwise you're going to cause trouble. But it doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. And that's important in society, and it's important that we know it. And in terms of the Hindu community in this country, more and more the community is becoming detached from its own texts because people don't study them. And they're starting to sound very like products of an Abrahamic tradition in so many ways. I was at a funeral, and person stood up, 800 people at the funeral, big funeral, lovely person who had passed away. And the priest had done a wonderful service and stood up and said, now we wish that he may rest in peace. Now that's just priest's vocabulary from the Anglican Church, right? There's nothing Hindu in that. May he rest in peace. We're just about to burn him. He's not resting at all. And he's possibly going to incarnate somewhere else, and within 5 minutes he'll be going, wah! He's not going to rest in peace. He doesn't want to rest in peace. Do you know what I mean? It's just how far away we are from thinking it through and making our decisions as to what our goal is, what success is, what failure is. It's not a success to rest in peace, after you die. It's a success to move on somewhere else. Whether it be the spiritual world, never to come back again, whether it be another body so we can qualify ourselves or enjoy more, whatever it is we want to do. We're given that freedom. But we do have to be careful that we think things through before we just blindly accept. That's the challenge of these texts and this talk, is success and failure is more complex than it may seem. And even if we think we've got a spiritual idea, have we really studied these stories? Because they do give us a spiritual challenge. There you go. Thank you very much. It is 8 o'clock. We will end here and invite the round.
Thank you. Thank you.